Well, good to see you all. Good to see everyone back here and a full room. It's still the place to be, Manila. Who would have thought a year ago? But here we are, stronger than ever. And what I want to do today in this very quick talk, I only take about 20 minutes of your time, is to have a look at where we are in the state of play in licensing. Primarily, of course, with a look at what we call pre-regulated and gray markets, what's going on out there, what licenses are being used, what should you do, what shouldn't you do, which is the direction we are all kind of heading. My day job is primarily now on the legal and licensing side and structure, so this is what I deal with every day, and I'll just give you a very honest look at what I see out there. It's as simple as that. So let's get right into it. So that's me. 20 years ago when I started, I had more hair. Now, I think they call me a veteran. I worked in Europe and Asia. Most of you probably know me anyway, so don't need that. But what we do need is a look at the gray market. So in the past, 20 years ago when I started, and many of you started, most markets were gray because there were no local licenses and laws in the majority of it. When I started with Ben Internet in the Isle of Man 20 years ago, Singapore was our biggest market. You could use Visa cards to take deposits. Go try that today. It was a different world. These days, more and more countries are issuing their own licenses as governments realize there is money to be made and it makes sense to regulate the activity. Some get it very right, but some get it very, very wrong. And the way the rules are enforced and this licensing regime in every country is protected also differ wildly across the globe. So a good example, of course, is right here, the Philippines, with the PIGO framework that we have. You all know POGOs are gone. Instead, and everyone said, oh, POGOs are gone, the Philippines is going to go down, this is terrible. Look at it. It's vibrant, it works, it gives the balance that the industry wanted and needs. It is, I think, very fair to say, a good example to follow for other Asian nations and certainly other nations around the world how to do it right. This is the way to do it. Encourage companies to come out of the shadows. Bad examples is my home country, Germany. The Glücksspielstaatsvertrag, as we call it, wonderful German name, is horrible. You have, I think, 1,000 euro per month deposit limits. You have a 6% turnover tax. You have things that basically make our industry, our business, not viable in the licensed way. So even if you want to do the right thing and get a license, it's very difficult to make money, if not almost impossible. As a result, the black market is booming because players don't want the licensed, the clean version that the government thinks is best. So governments sometimes get it wrong, or Colombia, I think it was in the news recently, who are introducing or thinking about introducing VAT on deposits. So every deposit you make to a bookmaker, you would pay 18% VAT. Brilliant idea who came up with that one. Again, your players will go away and go to the black market. So we had a really long workshop yesterday where we went through the different things, what regulators should and shouldn't do. Because most operators, and I've been an operator before, and I do licenses, and I do all sorts of things. Most operators are happy to play by the rules. They are happy to get a license. They are happy to come out in the open. Nobody wants to be in the shadows. Nobody wants the hassle of having to work on the fringes. We're happy to do that. And we want to be compliant, but you have to get the balance right if you are a government or a regulator, because if we can't make money, we can't be compliant. We don't have a business. People think there's so much money in gaming, and yes, there is, but the margins are small. Asian bookmakers, when I worked for 188 down in PBCom 10, 12 years ago, our margins were 2%. If you charge 18% on deposits and 6% on turnover, it doesn't work. So get the balance right. There's still no definite gray market list of countries where you can and can still go. It really depends which lawyer you ask, and it depends how brave you are if you are the UBO. If you like to live in the shadows and move around a lot with no fixed abode, you can probably target other countries, but if you want to live a more peaceful life, there are not many countries left that you can target. Popular markets, and some that are darker than gray, I'm not saying you should target these, I'm just seeing out there that's what people do. In Asia, certainly still Vietnam. Vietnam is still there, India is still there. Now some of these have local regulations, so the gray is sometimes less than gray. And again, it comes down to what lawyer you ask and what license you have. So, for example, if you have an Isle of Man license, you're going to find it harder to target some of these jurisdictions because the government won't stand for it. The enforcement is also changing. The way governments who bring in their own rules try and clamp down on those not licensed and those operating essentially illegally. It's in the olden days, and this still happens in some countries, they will block your URL, which is of course utterly pointless. So if you, for example, South Korea used to be famous for that. They're very quick in blocking the URLs. Now, by the time they block 50, or famously the Australian VGC, something, Victoria, they always send press releases out saying, we blocked another 50 URLs, very proudly, eloquently worded. By the time they've written that press release and send it out that they blocked 50 URLs, 5,000 URLs will have been established. It's pointless. Don't do this. Don't do IP blocks. Don't do that kind of thing. It doesn't work. What's happening now is the heat is going onto the suppliers. And again, the Philippines is a leading role in this one, and they realized it makes no sense to block URLs in this day and age. You go after the suppliers and you say, look, if you want to work in the local market legally and have a slice of this wonderful pie, licensed and protected and legit, you have to stop supplying the guys who haven't. And that makes total sense. The UK is doing this now. Other countries are following this model because it makes sense. And the suppliers think twice if they want to lose a legal market for continuing to supply operators that shouldn't be there. We're also seeing something that hasn't happened before. Now, our industry is still relatively young. You know, when I say I've been in it 20 years, the industry is less than 30 years old. So, you know, it's like for 2/3 of the industry's age, I've been in it, and many of you have been in it. Many of you have been in there from the beginning of it. Never before has there been so much media reporting about us, freely available. You have the guys of Josima Football, you have other investigative journalists digging in, doing very good jobs. If you go on YouTube, look up CoffeeZilla, Stephen, a YouTuber, very popular he's based in Texas. I actually spoke to him when he did his first investigations into gaming to give him some idea of how licensing works. They're doing fantastic jobs. He looked into the crypto money flows of some of the big operators a couple of years ago. If you go on his channel, I mean, it's professional journalistic work on a level and detail never seen before. So the spotlight is on us all more than it has ever been. Some don't like that. I think it's a good thing because it calls out the bad players. We're not doing ourselves any favors having any bad players and protecting them. So if you do something that you really shouldn't be doing, calling you out is a good thing. It's in our all interest. Also, operating these pre-regulated markets is getting increasingly costly, difficult, and risky. You know, if you do target some of the markets, and there are others as well, there are still operators, for example, who target the Philippines when they really, really shouldn't. Is that something you want to do? The answer is absolutely no, because you're playing with fire. And this kind of thing will stop in the future, but it doesn't automatically mean you're bad, because in some countries there really are no local regulations yet. There are no local rules that either prohibit or allow it, but there is a desire for players to play. So of course you're filling a void, and you know, it doesn't automatically mean you're bad, but it's a very, very fine line. And as long as the companies are willing to operate on the gray and the black fringes, there will be jurisdictions happy to give them a license. And this is sort of the core point. Because when you buy a license, you don't buy a license or a piece of paper, you buy legitimacy. This is what I always say. And the one field is, the questionable gray market field is really in the B2Cs, where you get a license from some place so you can target players in what you think is a gray market. Again, comes down which lawyer you ask. But in the B2B area, there is a more legitimate field. B2B licenses, software supplier licenses, as you also know them as, have become increasingly popular. As countries give out their own licenses, they want to know that whatever suppliers, games, platforms are operating there are legit. A B2B license, for example, an Isle of Man one, gives that legitimacy, that reassurance. So those are actually really good, future-proof and sustainable licenses. So the B2B area is definitely growing. The B2C gray market is dying. Let's have a very quick look through the key ones that are relevant today that I see demand for. Anjouan, on top of all at the moment in the gray market. It's an autonomous island in the southwestern Indian Ocean, part of the Union of Comoros. Now, depending which lawyer you ask, it's not a real country. It's semi-independent. It's a real country. It depends who you ask. Very, very, very popular. They fill the void that was left by Curacao, for sure. Over 1,000 licenses, 1,600 URLs licensed there. Crazy numbers. And minimal requirements. So they do background checks and ID checks, but it's really, really fast. It's all online. It is, let's call it very light touch. It's very cheap too. 17,000 for the license, then there's a new compliance fee now. Usually, if you're in the market for a grey market undrawn license and you pay more than 25,000 euros, you're being ripped off, because that's the standard price out in the market with all the consultants and the companies that do this. And I'm obviously in that field as well, so I see the prices. And this includes the company in usually Belize or somewhere to hold the license, because Anjouan does not require you to have a company in Anjouan. Now, if you're a lawyer, you will of course ask yourself, how could the Anjouan regulator ever enforce something against a company in Belize? I'll leave that for your legal colleagues to decide. Also, if you really, really cannot wait the 6 or 8 or 12 weeks that it takes to get one, you can go out in the market, you can buy a complete platform, company, bank account, and Anjouan license as a package for around about 40,000 euros. That's how cheap it is to get the minimum license to operate in the market these days. That's what I see every day. It's accepted by most game providers. It wasn't at the beginning, but as it became more popular, I think they were forced to do it, and banks also, certain banks, certainly not all. But there are absolute doubts about its legal status as a country. I don't think many lawyers agree that it is a real country, or it has the sufficient legal certainty that a real country would have. And the exclusive agent, it's a private public partnership. The guys actually, they're really good. They're ex-Curacao, they're based in Costa Rica who do it. They're very professional in what they're doing. If they should be doing it is a different matter, but they're very good at doing it. They are already preparing another new jurisdiction, which should be launched in a week or two from now. So you heard it here first. I can't tell you the name. I think I know where it is. It's in the Caribbean. And they are launching another one, which is aiming at the grey market and supposed to be better than Anjouan. So the new Anjouan 2.0, that's coming out in a week or two, I've been told, depending on the local parliament in that jurisdiction. So you can hop on Grok or ChatGPT and research which parliament is currently in the Caribbean talking about gaming laws, and you will know which one it is. But I promise not to tell. Malta, of course, the next one, big old player, the grand old Malta, always been popular with the European operators. Long track record as a very respected jurisdiction. 322 licenses when I checked yesterday. Again, still a solid player. License is still affordable for tier one. It's relatively cheap. The license fee is never a problem. Any operator I speak to, the actual license fee, if it's 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand, or 100 grand, doesn't matter. What's more important is the tax, and of course 5% gaming tax is more than other grey market jurisdictions charge. Reputation suffered recently when they were grey listed. They're off it now, but you all know the stories about Malta and what happened. But they have done something that is clever and cheeky in equal measures. They brought in Bill 55, which basically protects companies in Malta from enforcement from outside. Now, this is clearly aimed at gaming companies. So if you are a Maltese-based company with a Malta license and you target a company in Europe where you shouldn't be, in theory, this will protect you from enforcement action from, say, Germany or France or anywhere else. Very naughty, you could say, very clever from the, probably the politicians thought they're very clever with this. If they get away with it, I think the European courts will have the last word on that. But it's certainly an interesting approach that the jurisdiction would go and say, hey, here's a law that says you can't come here and sue us. It's almost American, isn't it? Curacao, the grand old dame of Curacao, was, of course, the grey market jurisdiction of them all until they were forced to change. Now, you all know the story. They were told to change many, many times. They never did. Then COVID happened, and the Netherlands went, look, we give you money to survive, but you finally have to change. And so they did. The old school model is gone, this master license with sub-license, which, by the way, was never a master license model. They were just licensees. There were, I think, 6 at the beginning. 1 fell out, and there were 5 left. Or it was 5 and then 4, 1 fell by the wayside. They were licensees. This master license, sub-license was never legal, was never official. But it operated, depending on who you ask, between 5 and 8,000 licenses were there. Maybe more, maybe less. Nobody knows. That's the weird thing, if you think about it. The country itself didn't know how many licenses it had issued. It's insane. But they have now changed the LOK, and I cannot pronounce, Harman can pronounce it, I can't pronounce it. The Landesverlag Casino Spielen, he can tell you later. Their new regulations are now enforced. They came out in December. It opens the door for them to really elevate themselves, become a tier one, and play with the big boys, which is a good thing. So they did the right thing. I know them well. I know Aideen and the guys, and they are trying to do the right thing. But the costs, of course, have gone up. In the olden days, a Curacao was something like 30 grand and few questions. Now it's at least 50,000. It's split in 25 license, 25 there's some sort of fee, plus you need local substance and that kind of thing. Costs are going up to a level of Isle of Man or Malta. Also, you have new compliance requirements, but if they do everything right, they can play on the same level as Malta and the Isle of Man and the likes. Also, they have a nice new online system. They claim they have the biggest IP database in the world because every single transaction that is run on a Curacao licensed website now is captured in real time. Now, of course, when they proudly told us that down in Malta last year, someone immediately asked, so if you see an American IP address, you can block it in real time, right? And then there was a bit of silence, but at least they have real-time monitoring. They are capable of seeing things that shouldn't be there. They are capable of seeing trends, problem gambling, that kind of thing. It's a very clever system. The Isle of Man, where I'm usually half of the year, so half the year I'm in the Isle of Man and half the year I'm here in Manila. One of the earliest jurisdictions, of course, back to the early 2000s with the 2001 Online Gaming Regulation Act, OGRA license. Recently, we were always the squeaky clean Isle of Man, and everything was always wonderful until King Gaming happened, the big scandal. I don't need to explain to you what happened, it was bad. And we had numerous other investigations. Just last week, there was a raids on 2 companies and anti-money laundering investigations. As a result, we have had some reputational damage on this, and I think the Isle of Man could have done better in the past. I don't want to speak too harshly about it because they are still, trying to do the right thing. In the past, the Isle of Man regulator, and we know them all, it's a very small island. Most of them who work for the regulator have worked for an operator, have worked for a CSP. So when we're in committee meetings and commission meetings, it's always really funny because they're all ex-colleagues, essentially. You know the people. They used to be very advisory. So in the past, they used to be like, if you did something wrong, you weren't quite compliant, they would go, look, you can't do this, you have to change. Now it's all enforcement, straight away. It's like, this is wrong, here's your €5 million fine or pound fine, off you go. So the attitude has changed, they're much, much stricter now. It's also unfortunately now being seen as a little bit of slow and outdated. So while even Anjouan has an online system to do their applications, the Isle of Man is still very much paper-based, long review processes. They really need to up their game, I'll be honest. It hurts to say that because I love the place, but it's the hard truth. So as a result, we have now a reputation of being relatively slow, strict, also not exactly cheap, but again, the fees really don't matter. We have no corporation tax, no capital gains tax. That kind of makes up for it. We have a little bit of gaming levy. It's not the end of the world. But the high cost and the relatively slow make it not that viable for B2C, certainly not viable if you're a startup. But we are still a very, very good jurisdictions for B2B, which are faster, which are really good and very acknowledged. And again, B2B, you may get an Isle of Man B2B to then get a license in France or somewhere else with your products because it shows that you have already passed muster somewhere else. B2B is a growth area. The other big growth area in the Isle of Man is B2B without license, which is permissible. So you can set up a company, I own one of those, where you distribute games or platforms without license in the Isle of Man, as long as it's only B2B. And then if it works out, maybe you want to get a B2B license so you get on the software master list. So that's a growth area and still a very great product. Tobique is another one of those that recently popped up in the wake of Curacao, minor player. The commercial model isn't that attractive to consultants. So for example, if you do Anjouan licenses, if you're a consultant, you make your money from the project fee that you charge the client. So the license 18 grand, the company's about £1,000, and you charge 5-6 grand to fill in the paperwork and help them along. Tobique kind of wants the whole cake and just gives you a little slice of it. That seems to be the feel. And it's quite pricey for what it is. So the 18,000 professional fee that you see is their project management fee. That's what a consultant would normally earn. And that, of course, puts a lot of consultants off. But it is still a very good, very viable license that you can look at in the gray market. And they have issued around 50 at the moment, and they're still growing and they're still doing a good thing. And the funny thing is, So Tobik is Canadian, of course. It's a Canadian nation, First Nation, but their office is actually, the people who do it, the private agents, it's in the Isle of Man. It's 50 meters up the road from our office. So it's a small industry. Kanawaki, again, really old player, Indian tribe jurisdiction. Has seen a resurgence in recent times. $40,000 thereabouts application fee, so not thereabouts, it's 40 and 20 annual fee, over 200 licenses. Now, we looked at them recently for a client, and they have gotten a lot stricter. So they are obviously also trying to modernize and go with the times, and they're also a gray market option. And Vanuatu, one of the earliest ones in the 90s, probably the earliest one in the 90s. All the old Australian guys were there. If you were in the game back in the early 90s, you know, telephone betting and not targeting Australia, you were probably in Vanuatu, probably in one of 2 buildings in Port Vila. Recently relaunched theirs. I've been there a couple of times now. Wonderful island, wonderful nation, nice people. And it cost 5,000 application, 10,000 license fee, and 1% gambling duty. However, they had a huge earthquake in December, and that has pretty much wiped out most of the central business district in Port Vila, wiped out most of the government buildings, really caused a lot of issues, and it seems to have disrupted the whole process. So they have, in theory, a very good thing going. In practice, it's come to a halt. So at the moment, I wanted to include them because I think there's massive potential, but they are not ready to go. And they will be ready at some point in the future, I'm sure, and they will also offer other licenses such as crypto, finance, FX, that kind of thing. A lot of FX companies, for example, are down there. So that's an overview of the jurisdictions that I see as relevant in the market today for gray market. There are, of course, others, you know, from Gibraltar, Alderney, Panama, you name it, but I don't see any demand for them in any way, shape, or form. Certainly not in the areas that, you know, I would want to look at. So either you want an easy license just to operate, then you get an Anju one, because everyone who comes to me or any of the other guys says, I just want a license. I want something that says I'm a legitimate gaming company. But they don't want to be, you know, stuck in 6 months compliance hell to do it. So, you know, either they want a license to go in the gray market if they're still brave enough, or operators now increasingly, and this is the direction we are going in as an industry, inevitably, you want to get a local license, and you only want to operate whiter than white. And I call this the Entain model, because Entain, a long time ago, for our industry, decided this is all we do. We will only do legal markets with local licenses. We will not touch gray, not touch black. This is the future. And they're absolutely right. It is the future. That is the way to do it. However, doing that requires a lot of money and compliance effort and the resources to do so. If you're a little startup, it's not practical to get a Brazilian license, for example, because it costs a lot of money. Future challenges, definitely for us, are how we regulate new tech, such as AI. I've said this at every talk I'm saying. How many of you have AI in the terms and conditions of your website or your business website or your products? What do you do if one of your players uses AI to get one over on the book? If he figures out the algorithm of your slot or your game, finds a mistake in it, if he knows more about sports odds than you, is he cheating? If you haven't got it in your terms and conditions and he goes to court, and these court cases will happen, he's going to take the money off you. So this is something people really have to think about. Also, you have to get it right if you are regulated, the balance. We are, as an industry, I speak to so many operators, and I've been an operator. We want to be licensed. We want to be happy. You know, if you do it like the Philippines, we're happy. We're happy to do that. Pay tax, be licensed, jump through the hoops. Totally okay. But don't make it too difficult, because we're trying to comply. And this is something that has happened, for example, in the Isle of Man, where they have gotten so very, very, very strict that some companies now saying, look, we're really trying to be compliant, but we feel like this is asking too much, and then they leave. Or if you do it like Germany and you just make it economically not viable. Commercially, it's just dead in the water. And you, if you are an operator, you have to get used to getting multiple licenses if you want to be international. But equally, if you are a B2B provider of any type, you need to get a B2B license so you can service these operators that have local licenses, because they will ask licenses of you. They will ask, are you legit? The gray market will disappear. I said this before. I stick by it. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Philippines, the latest one. Thailand is working on regulations. Japan is going to come. South Korea, I recently heard they're working on it. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. it's the direction we're going, you better get ready for it now, or you be like Entain and get ready for it 5 years ago, because this takes time. And you will have to get a license for every target country that you want to do, but there will always be a dark fringe. That will not go away. There will always be what we call gray, but this gray really is now faded to black. And you need to think very, very careful if you want to be in that area, because in future, your life is going to be a whole lot easier and more profitable if you join the 50 Shades of White, you know, if you get your local licenses and you do things the right way. And most countries do get it right, and the ones that get it wrong, they still have an opportunity to fix their problems, and hopefully they will do so, even if it takes, of course, with countries, a lot of time. So that's really all I wanted to show you today, just a quick overview of the jurisdictions. There's still a gray market, it's going away, it's going to country-by-country licenses. Pick your target countries carefully, because it's going to cost you a lot of money, time, and effort to get a local license. But if you do it right, it means you future-proof your business, you make it sustainable in every single way, from commercially to responsible gambling, to just being able to sleep at night. And that's basically the overview. That's me, that's my LinkedIn. Always happy to answer questions, and that's all I want to talk about today. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed it.